Sarah pulled her light jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked down Mason Street. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Her footsteps echoed against the brick buildings, a lonely sound that made her wish she'd accepted her co-worker Jenny's offer for a ride home. The street lamps cast pools of yellow light on the sidewalk, creating long shadows that stretched across her path. A paper coffee cup tumbled across the empty street, the only movement besides her own. Sarah checked her phone. 10:45 p.m. Her mother would be waiting up, probably pacing the apartment and checking her window every few minutes. "I'm 22, for crying out loud," Sarah muttered, shaking her head. Her mother meant well, but the constant hovering was becoming unbearable. Just yesterday, Linda had insisted on knowing exactly where Sarah was going for lunch, who she was meeting, and when she'd be back. It was exhausting. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now, back to the story. The cafe job had been Sarah's first taste of real independence. She'd found it on her own, interviewed without her mother's help, and now had her own money to spend. But even that small victory had come with strings attached. Strict rules about working late shifts and endless texts asking if she was okay. A car rolled past, its headlights briefly illuminating the empty storefronts. Sarah's fingers tightened around her phone, remembering her mother's warnings about walking alone at night. The sound of her boots clicking against the concrete seemed louder now, more exposed. "I could have been living in the dorms at college," she said to herself, thinking of the university acceptance letter she'd turned down to stay close to home. Her mother had been so relieved when Sarah chose the local community college instead. Now, 2 years later, Sarah wondered if she'd made the right choice. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees that lined the street. Ahead, the traffic light changed from green to red, though there were no cars waiting. Sarah crossed her arms, trying to ward off the chill. The familiar sight of her apartment building was just a few blocks away. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, making her jump. Sarah laughed at herself, but the sound died in her throat as she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy boots on concrete, steady and purposeful. Her heart began to race. "Don't panic," she told herself. "Just keep walking." But her legs felt wooden, her steps uneven. The footsteps grew closer. Sarah reached for her pepper spray, fumbling with her purse. The small canister slipped through her trembling fingers, clattering to the sidewalk. As she bent to retrieve it, a shadow fell across her. Looking up, Sarah found herself staring at a man who seemed to fill her entire field of vision. He wore a leather jacket covered in patches, his face partially hidden behind a thick beard. In the dim light, she could see the intensity in his eyes as they locked onto hers. Before she could scream or run, he spoke in a low, urgent voice that carried both authority and concern. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." Sarah froze, her hand still reaching for the pepper spray, as his words sank in. The man's piercing gaze held hers, and in that moment, despite his intimidating appearance, she saw something in his eyes that made her hesitate. Something that looked surprisingly like genuine worry. The stranger's words hung in the air like a cold mist. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the man before her. His weathered face and leather jacket marked him as someone her mother had always warned her about. But there was something in his eyes, an urgent sincerity that made her pause. "What? Who are you?" Sarah's voice quivered despite her attempt to sound confident. She took a small step backward, her fingers clutching her phone tighter. "No time to explain." His voice was low and gravelly, but not threatening. "Just walk with me. Act natural." He gestured forward with a slight nod of his head. Sarah's mind raced through her options. Run, scream, call the police? But something in the man's demeanor, the way he kept scanning the street, how he positioned himself between her and the road, felt protective rather than predatory. Against her better judgment, She fell into step beside him. He matched her pace perfectly. Not too fast or slow, like he'd done this before. The streetlights cast their joined shadows across the pavement. His tall and broad, hers small and hesitant. "My name's Jax," he said quietly, keeping his eyes forward. "Just keep walking and smile if anyone looks our way. Like we're having a normal conversation." Sarah tried to steady her breathing. "Why should I trust you?" "Because right now, I'm the only one who knows what's coming." His words sent a chill down her spine. They walked another half block in tense silence. Sarah noticed how Jax kept himself between her and the street, his broad shoulders creating a barrier that felt oddly reassuring despite her fear. His presence was commanding, but controlled, like a guard dog that knew exactly when to bark and when to stay quiet. The sudden roar of an engine shattered the quiet night. A black sedan with tinted windows sped past them, its tires squealing against the asphalt. Sarah jumped at the sound, but Jax remained steady beside her. The car screeched to a halt 20 feet ahead of them, its brake lights painting the street red. Two men emerged from the vehicle, one tall and lean, the other shorter but muscular. Both wore dark clothes and carried themselves with an aggressive swagger that made Sarah's stomach clench. "Well, well," the taller one called out, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Look who it is." Jax's posture shifted subtly. He didn't move away from Sarah, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. His hand brushed her elbow, gently guiding her slightly behind him. "Evening, boys," Jax replied, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "Nice night for a drive." The shorter man took a step forward, his boots scraping against the concrete. "Didn't expect to see you in this neighborhood." "Just taking my daughter home," Jax said smoothly. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. "You know how it is. Can't be too careful these days." The two men exchanged looks. Sarah held her breath, feeling the weight of unspoken threats hanging in the air. The taller man's hand twitched toward his jacket, but Jax's steady gaze never wavered. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, the shorter man backed away. "Another time, then," he said, his words carrying a promise of future trouble. They returned to their car, the engine growling to life. The sedan pulled away slowly, its taillights disappearing around the corner. Sarah realized she was trembling, her knees weak with relief and lingering fear. Sarah jolted awake to the shrill ring of her phone. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, creating patterns on her rumpled sheets. Her mom's name flashed on the screen, and she answered with a groggy, "Hello? Sarah, are you okay?" Linda's voice crackled through the speaker, tight with worry. Sarah sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be?" I had a feeling." Linda's breath hitched slightly. "Did anything unusual happen last night?" The memory of Jax and those men in the car flooded back. Sarah's hand tightened around her phone. Should she tell her mom? But that would only make her more protective, more controlling. "Nothing happened, Mom. Just the usual walk home from work." The lie felt heavy on her tongue. "Are you sure? Because I could drive you to work from now on. Or maybe you could look for a job closer to home." Linda's words tumbled out faster now, almost desperate. Sarah swung her legs off the bed, frustration building in her chest. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm 22. I can handle walking a few blocks." I know, it's just—" Linda paused. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." Sarah ended the call and got ready for work, trying to shake off her mother's anxiety. But something about her mom's tone nagged at her. It was different today, more urgent than her usual worry. The morning air was crisp as Sarah walked to the cafe, her boots clicking against the sidewalk. She'd almost convinced herself that last night was just a strange dream when a familiar figure stepped out from around the corner. Jack stood there, looking less intimidating in the daylight, but still commanding attention. His leather jacket was worn at the edges, and his beard was neatly trimmed, not the disheveled appearance she'd expected from a biker. "Morning," he said, falling into step beside her, as if this was perfectly normal. Sarah's steps faltered. "Are you following me?" "Just making sure you're safe." His eyes scanned the street, a habit she'd noticed last night. Your father would have wanted that. Sarah stopped dead in her tracks. "My father?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. "What do you know about my father?" Jax turned to face her, his expression softening. "I knew him. Pretty well, actually." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Sarah's father had died when she was young. A car accident, her mother had said. She had so few memories of him. Just fragments, really. A warm laugh, strong hands lifting her up, the smell of leather and motor oil. "That's impossible," Sarah said, taking a step back. "You're lying." "I'm not," Jax replied quietly. "But this isn't the time or place to explain." Sarah shook her head, her thoughts spinning like autumn leaves in a storm. "Stay away from me," she said, pushing past him toward the cafe. But, even as she walked away, questions multiplied in her mind like echoes. How did this stranger know her father? Why was he here now? And why did her mother sound so afraid this morning? Sarah pushed her fork through the spaghetti on her plate, watching her mother carefully across their small kitchen table. The overhead light cast shadows on Linda's face, making her look older, more tired than usual. Steam rose from their plates, filling the air with a familiar scent of garlic and herbs. "Mom," Sarah began, setting her fork down. "Something weird happened today." Linda looked up, her movements slow and deliberate as she twirled pasta around her fork. "Oh, I ran into someone. A man named Jax." Sarah watched her mother's hand freeze mid-motion. "He said he knew Dad." The fork clattered against Linda's plate. She quickly picked it up, wiping non-existent sauce from the tablecloth. "There are lots of people who might have known your father, sweetie. But this felt different." Sarah leaned forward. "He seemed to know things. Personal things." Linda's shoulders tensed. What exactly did this man say? "Not much, but—" "Then, there's nothing to discuss." Linda cut her off, her voice sharp. "Your father knew many people through his work. This Jax person probably just crossed paths with him once or twice." Sarah frowned. "But Mom—" "Sarah, please." Linda stood up abruptly, gathering her barely touched dinner. "I don't want to talk about this. Some strange man makes a vague comment about knowing your father, and suddenly you're ready to believe anything." "You're not even listening to me." Sarah's voice rose. "Why are you being so defensive?" "I'm not being defensive." Linda scraped her plate into the trash with more force than necessary. "I'm being practical. We don't know this man, and I don't want you talking to strangers." "I'm not a child anymore." Sarah pushed back from the table. "Why won't you ever tell me anything about Dad? About your life before?" Linda turned to face her, hands gripping the edge of the sink. "Because the past is the past, Sarah. Let it stay there." The conversation died after that, leaving an uncomfortable silence hanging between them. Sarah helped clean up without another word, the clink of dishes the only sound in their small kitchen. Later that evening, Sarah padded down the hallway for a glass of water. Her mother's voice drifted from the living room, low and urgent. "I don't know what to do, Marie." Linda was on the phone, pacing near the window. "He shouldn't be here. None of them should." Sarah pressed herself against the wall, listening. "Of course I haven't told her." Linda's whisper was fierce. "What am I supposed to say? That everything she thinks she knows about—" She stopped abruptly. "No, you're right. Some things are better left buried." A pause. Sarah held her breath. "I thought we were safe here." Linda's voice cracked slightly. "I thought we'd finally gotten away from all of that. But now? God, Marie, if she finds out." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she strained to hear more. You're right, Linda said after a long moment. The past needs to stay in the past. I won't let it hurt her. Not again. Sarah sat cross-legged on her bed, her laptop balanced on her knees. The soft glow of the screen lit up her face in the dimness of her room. Outside, crickets chirped their evening song, but she barely noticed, too focused on her search. There has to be something, she muttered, typing different combinations of her mother's name into the search bar. She'd been at it for hours, digging through old social media posts and local news archives. Just as her eyes began to blur from staring at the screen, something caught her attention. It was a link to an old community newspaper article about a local biker rally from 25 years ago. Sarah clicked it, her heart beating faster as the page loaded. The black and white photograph was grainy, showing a large group of people gathered around their motorcycles. Sarah squinted, leaning closer to the screen. Her breath caught in her throat. There, in the middle of the crowd, stood a younger version of her mother. Linda's hair was longer then, flowing past her shoulders, and she wore a leather jacket. But what made Sarah's hands shake was the man standing next to her mother. Jax, looking younger, but unmistakable with his broad shoulders and intense expression. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, saving the photo to her phone. Her mother had lied to her face. They didn't just know each other. They had been friends, or maybe more than that. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Why would her mother hide this? What else wasn't she telling her? The Linda in the photo looked so different from the careful, controlling mother she knew. This Linda looked free, wild even. With trembling fingers, Sarah pushed her laptop aside and got up. She found her mother in the living room, reading a book under the soft glow of the table lamp. The familiar scene, her mother in her favorite armchair, reading glasses perched on her nose, suddenly felt like a lie. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she expected. "We need to talk." Linda looked up, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "What is it, honey?" Sarah held up her phone, displaying the old photograph. "Want to explain this?" The color drained from Linda's face. She set her book down slowly, deliberately, as if buying time. "Where did you find that?" "Online." Sarah moved closer, her hand still extended with the photo. "You told me you didn't know Jax, but here you are, standing right next to him." Linda pressed her lips together, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Sarah, that was a very long time ago." "So you admit you know him?" Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. "Why did you lie to me?" Her mother's face hardened, a wall coming down behind her eyes. Some things are better left in the past where they belong. "That's not good enough." Sarah's voice rose. "I deserve to know the truth. Who is he? How did you know him? What does this have to do with Dad?" Linda stood up abruptly, her movements stiff. "I'm not having this conversation." She walked toward the kitchen, her shoulders rigid. "Mom, please." Sarah followed her. "You can't keep hiding things from me. I'm not a child anymore." But Linda had already shut down, busying herself with washing dishes that were already clean, her back turned to Sarah. The only sound was the running water and the quiet clink of plates, her silence a wall between them. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, the photograph still glowing on her phone screen, feeling more alone than ever. Her mother's refusal to talk only confirmed what she already suspected. There was much more to this story than anyone was willing to tell her. The bell above the door chimed as Sarah stepped into the Rusty Bean, a small coffee shop nestled between a laundromat and a second-hand bookstore. The aroma of freshly ground coffee filled her nostrils as she scanned the dimly lit interior. Morning sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across worn wooden tables. She'd overheard two regulars at her cafe mention that Jax often stopped here for his morning coffee. Her heart thumped against her ribs as she spotted him sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing a steaming cup. He wore the same leather jacket as before, his weathered face partially hidden behind his graying beard. Sarah ordered a vanilla latte, her hands shaking slightly as she handed over the money. While waiting for her drink, she gathered her courage. The barista called her name, and she wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, drawing strength from its heat. Taking a deep breath, she approached Jax's table. He looked up, his expression unreadable, but not unfriendly. "I had a feeling you'd come looking for me sooner or later," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "May I?" Sarah gestured to the empty seat across from him. Jax nodded, pushing aside his half-eaten muffin. "Your mother know you're here?" "No." Sarah settled into the booth, placing her latte carefully on the table. "Mom's not exactly forthcoming with information these days." A hint of sadness crossed Jax's face. "Linda's always been protective of you." "Can't say I blame her." "I found an old photograph," Sarah said, pulling out her phone and sliding it across the table. "You and my mom, at some biker rally years ago. She won't tell me anything about it." Jax studied the picture, his fingers tracing the edge of the phone screen. "Different times," he murmured. "Your mother was different back then. We all were." "Please," Sarah leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know the truth. How do you know my family?" The morning crowd bustled around them, but in their corner, time seemed to slow. Jax took a long sip of his coffee, his eyes distant with memories. "Your mother's brother Tommy was my best friend," he finally said. "We rode together in the Angels. He was wild, fearless, everything I wanted to be. Linda got pulled into that world because of him." Sarah's hands tightened around her cup. "My mom had a brother? She's never mentioned him." "Tommy wasn't the kind of person Linda wants you knowing about. He was notorious in the biker world, got mixed up in things that eventually got him killed." Jax's voice grew heavy with the weight of the past. "After that, your mother cut ties with everyone from that life. Started fresh." Sarah sat back, trying to process this information. Her mother, who fretted over Sarah riding a bicycle without a helmet, had once been part of a biker gang's inner circle. Why keep it secret for so long? "She wanted to protect you from that world," Jax said, meeting her eyes. "Linda's carried this secret for years, thinking it would keep you safe. Maybe she's right. Some parts of the past are better left buried." The morning sun had climbed higher, casting Jax's face in sharp relief. In the harsh light, Sarah could see the toll the years had taken on him, the weight of secrets etched in the lines around his eyes. Sarah opened her mouth to ask another question, but Jax held up his hand. "That's all I can tell you for now. The rest needs to come from your mother." Sarah's hands trembled as she turned her key in the lock. The coffee shop conversation with Jax had left her mind spinning, and now she needed answers. Real answers. She found her mother in the kitchen, methodically washing dishes like she always did when she was anxious. "Mom," Sarah said firmly, "we need to talk. About Jax." Linda's shoulders stiffened, and the plate she was washing slipped back into the soapy water with a splash. "There's nothing to talk about," she mumbled, but her voice wavered. "I know that's not true." Sarah pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. "I just talked to him. He told me about Uncle Mike." Linda dried her hands slowly on a dish towel, her back still turned. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence between them. Finally, she turned around, and Sarah was struck by how tired her mother looked, how the weight of whatever she'd been carrying seemed to press down on her shoulders. "I never wanted you mixed up in any of this," Linda whispered, sinking into the chair across from Sarah. Her hands twisted the dish towel nervously. "That world, it's dangerous, Sarah. So dangerous." "What world, Mom? Please, just tell me the truth." Linda took a deep, shaky breath. "Your Uncle Mike was involved with the Hells Angels, deep into it. And Jax was like his right-hand man. They protected us, protected me, when things got rough." Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. Protected you from what? Other gangs. People who wanted revenge. People who... Linda's voice cracked. There was always someone. Always some threat. Living like that, constantly looking over your shoulder, it does something to you. Tears welled up in Linda's eyes. When Mike died, I knew I had to get out. Had to keep you safe. Jax, he wanted to help, to keep watching over us, but I couldn't. I couldn't let you grow up in that world. So I cut all ties, moved us away, started fresh. Sarah reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Why didn't you ever tell me? How could I? Linda wiped her eyes with her free hand. You were so young, so innocent. I wanted you to have a normal life without fear, without... She gestured helplessly. Without all of that darkness hanging over you. Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. But Mom, keeping all these secrets, it didn't protect me. It just left me in the dark. Linda nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I know that now. I was so scared of losing you the way I lost Mike that I went too far, tried too hard to keep you safe. A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah stood up, wiping her own eyes. I'll get it. Sarah, wait. Linda started, but Sarah was already heading to the door. She opened it to find a man standing there, tall, with graying hair and hard eyes. She recognized him as one of the men from the car that had confronted Jax that night. His presence made her skin crawl. Sarah, he said, his voice low and gravelly. I need you to listen carefully. Stay away from Jax. He's not the protector he pretends to be. His eyes flicked past her to Linda, who had appeared in the hallway. Some of us haven't forgotten what happened to Mike. And we haven't forgiven. Sarah sat at her kitchen table long after her mother had gone to bed, the stranger's warning echoing in her mind. Stay away from Jax if you know what's good for you. The words made her stomach twist into knots. Linda had spent the entire evening pacing, checking the locks repeatedly, and peering through the curtains. Promise me you won't see him again, she'd begged, her face pale with worry. You don't understand what these people are capable of. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Jax was different. The way he'd protected her that night, the genuine concern in his eyes. It didn't match her mother's warnings. She pulled out her phone, looking at the number Jax had given her at the coffee shop. Her thumb hovered over the keys. The next morning, Sarah's head felt heavy from lack of sleep. She'd tossed and turned all night, torn between her mother's fears and her own curiosity. Linda hovered around her more than usual, making excuses to stay home from work. Mom, you can't watch me every second, Sarah finally said, frustration creeping into her voice. I'm not a child anymore. You don't know what you're dealing with, Linda insisted, wringing her hands. These people, they hold grudges for decades. They never forget, and they never forgive. But Sarah had already made up her mind. During her lunch break, she texted Jax to meet her at Wilson's Point, a quiet overlook above the marina where old fishing boats bobbed in the water. It was public enough to feel safe, but private enough for a real conversation. Jax was already there when she arrived, leaning against the railing. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his weathered face. I was hoping you'd reach out, he said quietly. Tell me everything, Sarah demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. No more hints or half-truths. Jax's expression darkened as he gazed out at the water. Your Uncle Mike wasn't just any member of the Angels. He was rising fast, making waves. But there was another guy, Dante, the Viper Moreno, who didn't like being overshadowed. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon. Dante set Mike up, Jax continued, his voice rough with old pain. Made it look like he'd betrayed the club. Your mother, she knew too much. She was there the night everything went wrong. That's why she ran. And this Dante, Sarah whispered, He's still out there. Jax turned to face her, his eyes intense. He's more than out there. He's back in town, and he's got unfinished business. Those men who've been watching you, they're his people. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as the pieces clicked into place. The strange cars she'd noticed following her, the shadowy figures outside the cafe. I can protect you, Jax said firmly. Both you and Linda. But you have to trust me. Sarah gripped the railing, her knuckles white. Her mother's warnings warred with Jax's sincerity. The truth about her family's past was finally unfolding. But it was darker than she'd imagined. Could she trust Jax, knowing he was part of the world that had gotten her uncle killed? Or was her mother right? Should she run as far as she could from all of this? She looked up at Jax, searching his face for answers, but found only more questions. The weight of the choice pressed down on her like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. Sarah's phone buzzed on her desk at work, displaying an unknown number. Her stomach clenched as she answered. Nothing but heavy breathing came through the line, followed by a click. 3 calls like this had come in since morning. She tried to focus on serving customers at the cafe, but her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. The bell above the door chimed, making her jump. Just another regular customer, she told herself, forcing a smile. During her break, she checked her phone again. A new text message waited. Your Uncle Mike thought he was untouchable too. Look what happened to him. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She deleted the message, but another one came moments later. The Viper never forgets. Hey, you okay? Her coworker Amy asked, noticing Sarah's pale face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just not feeling great, Sarah managed, tucking her phone away. She couldn't tell anyone what was really happening. Who would believe her? The rest of her shift crawled by. Every customer who walked in could be watching her. Every motorcycle that rumbled past the cafe made her heart race. When closing time finally came, Sarah practically ran to her car. At home, she double-checked all the locks and drew the curtains tight. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Pretty apartment you've got. Blue curtains look nice from the street. Sarah's hands shook as she peeked through the curtains. The street looked empty, but someone was out there, watching. She could feel it. 2 more messages arrived while she tried to heat up dinner. Ask Jax about the night your uncle died. And then, or better yet, ask your mother why she really ran. Sarah couldn't eat. She paced her small living room, jumping at every sound from outside. Around 8, someone knocked on her door. Her heart nearly stopped, but it was just Mrs. Peterson from next door, asking to borrow some sugar. After Mrs. Peterson left, Sarah noticed another text. Time's running out. Stay away from Jax, or else. She took a hot shower, trying to calm her nerves. The water helped a little, but when she stepped out, she heard something that made her freeze. A sound from the living room. Sarah wrapped herself in her robe, heart pounding. She crept down the hallway, phone in hand, ready to call 911. The living room was dark, but even in the dim light, she could see what they'd done. Her breath caught in her throat. Everything was torn apart. Couch cushions slashed open, papers scattered everywhere, photos knocked off the walls. But nothing seemed to be missing. Her laptop, TV, and other valuables sat untouched. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. On her coffee table, someone had left a playing card, the Ace of Spades. Written across it in red ink were the words, Final Warning. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up her phone. She scrolled past her mother's number, past 911, and found Jax's contact. She'd been trying to handle this alone, trying to convince herself it wasn't as serious as it seemed. But now, the card shook in her hand as she snapped a photo and sent it to Jax. Within seconds, her phone rang. I'm coming over, Jax said, his voice hard with concern. Pack a bag. You're not staying there tonight." For the first time since the threats began, Sarah felt something close to relief. She didn't know if she could trust Jax completely, but right now, he was the only one who understood what she was up against. The community center's basement gym smelled of old leather and determination. Sarah stood on worn blue mats, her hands raised in a defensive position as Jax circled her slowly. "Keep your guard up," Jax instructed, his voice gentle but firm. "Remember, it's not about strength. It's about using their momentum against them." Sarah nodded, concentrating on her stance. For the past week, they'd been meeting here after hours, Jax teaching her the basics of self-defense. Her muscles ached, but she felt stronger with each session. "Good," Jax said, as Sarah successfully blocked his slow-motion attack. "You're learning fast." He stepped back, grabbing 2 water bottles from his gym bag. Sarah noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the room, checking the exits, always alert, always protective. They sat on a bench against the wall, catching their breath. Sarah watched as Jax's weathered features softened, something clearly weighing on his mind. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Something I should have told you from the start." He rubbed his beard, a nervous gesture she'd come to recognize. Sarah's heart picked up speed, and not from the exercise. "What is it?" "I wasn't just someone who knew your father," Jax said, meeting her eyes. "He was my brother. I'm your uncle, Sarah." The words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah stood up, taking a few steps back. "What? No, that can't be true." But even as she said it, pieces started falling into place. His protective nature, the way he looked at her sometimes with such sadness and pride. "Your father, Mike, was my older brother," Jax continued, staying seated to give her space. "We were both in the Angels, but he wanted out after he met your mother. He was trying to make a clean break." Sarah's legs felt weak. She sank back onto the bench. "Why didn't Mom ever tell me about you?" "She was trying to protect you," Jax explained. "After what happened to Mike, she wanted to keep you far away from that life." His voice cracked slightly. "I respected her wishes, stayed away. But when I heard Dante was asking questions about you, I couldn't stay back anymore." "Dante?" Sarah asked, the name sending a chill down her spine. "We need to talk about your father," Jax said, standing up. "But not here. Will you come with me?" 20 minutes later, they stood in front of a simple headstone in the local cemetery. Michael James Moreno was carved in the granite, along with dates that made Sarah's heart ache. He'd only been 32 when he died. "Your dad was the best of us," Jax said softly, placing a hand on the stone. "He saw a way out, a chance at a real life with your mom. But leaving the Angels," he shook his head, "there was unfinished business, a debt that some people thought wasn't settled." Sarah hugged herself against the evening chill, staring at her father's name. "What kind of debt?" "Money, territory, respect. All of it tied up with Dante, who was rising through the ranks back then." Jax's voice grew heavy with memory. Mike thought he could reason with them, make peace. He was always the diplomatic one. He paused, his hand tightening on the headstone. That's what got him killed. Sarah's new phone buzzed in her pocket, a small, basic model Jax had given her for emergencies only. She pulled it out, checking the message. "Red truck, 3 times past cafe. Stay inside." Through the cafe window, she spotted the vehicle Jax mentioned crawling past, like a predator searching for prey. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped down tables, trying to appear casual while keeping track of her surroundings, just as Jax had taught her. "Head up, eyes moving," she whispered to herself, remembering his instructions. "Be aware without looking afraid." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows as Sarah finished her shift. Right on time, Jax's motorcycle rumbled to a stop outside. He'd been picking her up from work every day this week, his protective presence both comforting and concerning. "You saw my message?" he asked as she approached, handing her a helmet. Sarah nodded, securing the strap under her chin. "The red truck. What do you think they wanted?" "Just watching for now. Testing our routine." Jax's eyes scanned the street as Sarah climbed on behind him. "We'll take a different route home today." The ride was longer than usual, winding through back streets and doubling back several times to ensure they weren't followed. When they finally arrived at Sarah's apartment, Linda was waiting outside, her arms crossed and face tight with worry. "This has to stop," Linda said as Sarah dismounted. "You can't keep putting yourself in danger like this." "Mom, I'm fine. Jax is helping me stay safe." "Safe?" Linda's voice cracked. "There was no danger until he showed up again." She turned to Jax, her eyes glistening. "You promised to stay away. You promised to let us live our lives." Jax remained calm, his voice steady. "Things have changed, Linda. They found her on their own. Staying away isn't protecting her anymore." Sarah watched her mother's composure crumble. Linda's shoulders sagged as she pressed her hands to her face, years of buried fears surfacing at once. "You don't understand what they're capable of," Linda whispered, looking at Sarah. "Your father. We lost him because of them. I've spent 20 years trying to keep you safe from this world. Then, help me understand," Sarah pleaded. "Stop hiding the truth." Linda shook her head, tears now flowing freely. "They're monsters, Sarah. The things I've seen them do. I can't lose you too. Please." She reached for her daughter's hands, gripping them tightly. "Stay away from Jax. Stay away from all of it. We can move again, start fresh somewhere else." "Running won't fix this," Jax said softly. "They know about her now. She needs to learn to protect herself." "Protect herself?" Linda's voice rose. "Like you protected your brother? Like you protected our family?" She turned back to Sarah, her voice breaking with desperation. "Baby, please, I'm begging you. Stay away from him. Stay away from all of this. I can't face them again. I'm not strong enough." Sarah stood frozen between them, her mother's fear-filled plea on one side, Jax's steady presence on the other. The weight of their shared past, of all the secrets still untold, hung heavy in the air between them. Sarah's fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove home from work. The setting sun painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, casting long shadows across the road. She'd insisted on driving herself today, wanting just a small taste of independence despite Jax's protests. A black SUV appeared in her rearview mirror, staying uncomfortably close. Sarah's heart quickened as she remembered Jax's warnings about being followed. She took a right turn, then another, watching as the SUV mirrored her movements. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, taking deep breaths. "Just like Jax taught you." The SUV suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside her car. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she glimpsed the driver, a man with cold eyes and a twisted smile. Without warning, he jerked his wheel toward her. Sarah reacted instinctively, swerving away from the impact. Her tires squealed as she fought to keep control. The SUV tried again, coming at her faster this time. She yanked the wheel hard, barely missing a parked car, as she made a sharp turn onto a side street. Her hands shook as she fumbled for the emergency phone Jax had given her. The SUV had disappeared, but the message was clear. They weren't just watching anymore. "Jax," she said when he answered, her voice trembling. "They just tried to run me off the road." "Where are you?" His voice was tight with concern. "Near Murphy's bar. I got away, but stay there. I'm 5 minutes out." Sarah parked in front of Murphy's, her heart still racing. Through the bar's windows, she could see several rough-looking men watching her. Something about their stares made her skin crawl. When Jax's motorcycle roared up minutes later, Sarah nearly cried with relief. But as she stepped out of her car, 3 men emerged from the bar, their expressions predatory. "Well, look who it is," one of them called out, his voice slurred with alcohol. "Little Sarah, all grown up." Sarah froze. These men knew her name. The tallest one, wearing a leather vest covered in patches, moved closer. "Your daddy would be real disappointed," he sneered, "seeing you running around with his killer brother." Before Sarah could process his words, the man lunged forward and grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into her flesh as he tried to pull her closer. "Let her go!" Jax's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stepped between them, breaking the man's grip on Sarah's arm. "This ain't your business anymore, Jax," another man spat. "You lost that right when you turned your back on us." "Sarah is my business," Jax growled, pushing her behind him protectively. "And if any of you touch her again, you'll answer to me." The first man threw a punch, but Jax was faster. He blocked it and countered with a swift strike that sent the attacker stumbling backward. The other two men moved in, but Jax stood his ground, his body a shield between them and Sarah. "Last warning," Jax said, his voice deadly calm. "Walk away." The men hesitated, looking at their fallen friend who was still trying to get up. After a tense moment, they backed off, dragging their companion with them. "This isn't over," one called over his shoulder as they retreated. Sarah stood trembling behind Jax, realizing that everything he'd been trying to protect her from was far worse than she'd imagined. These men didn't just know her. They had history with her family, and whatever had happened in the past was now threatening her present. The neon sign of Murphy's Bar cast a red glow across the empty parking lot as Sarah leaned against her car, still trembling from the encounter. Jax stood nearby, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of trouble. "Who were they?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did they know my father?" Jax ran a hand through his graying beard, conflict etched across his weathered face. "Let's get somewhere safer first." They drove to a small diner on the outskirts of town, one of those 24-hour places where the coffee was always hot and the fluorescent lights never dimmed. Sarah wrapped her hands around a steaming mug, while Jax settled into the vinyl booth across from her. "Your father and I," Jax began, his voice low and gravelly. "We were both members of the Hells Angels. Not just members. We were rising stars." He paused, studying Sarah's reaction. "The man who grabbed you tonight was Dante Moreno. We used to call him the Viper." Sarah's fingers tightened around her mug. "Why the Viper?" "Because he strikes when you least expect it," Jax said grimly. "He was our enforcer back then. Your father and we were planning to leave the gang. We'd seen too much, done too much. But leaving isn't simple, not with people like Dante around." The waitress stopped by to refill their cups, and Jax waited until she was out of earshot before continuing. "Your father discovered something about Dante, something that could have destroyed him. Before he could expose it, there was an accident." Jax's voice caught on the last word. Sarah felt her blood run cold. "An accident?" "That's what the police called it. But I knew better. Your mother knew better too. That's why she took you and ran, cut ties with everyone from that life, including me." Jax's eyes held a deep sadness. "I respected her choice, but I couldn't stay away completely. I've been watching over you both from a distance ever since." Sarah pushed her coffee aside, feeling sick. "And now Dante's back? Why, after all this time?" "Because he heard I was getting close to proving what really happened that night," Jax said. "He's not just after you, Sarah. He's trying to finish what he started years ago, eliminating anyone who knows the truth." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as years of questions finally found their answers. Her mother's constant fear, the midnight moves from town to town when she was younger, the way Linda would flinch at the sound of motorcycles. It all made sense now. "Mom's been carrying this burden alone all these years," Sarah whispered. "She must have been so scared." Jax nodded solemnly. "Linda did what she had to do to protect you. She's stronger than most people I know." Sarah wiped her eyes with a paper napkin. "I need to talk to her, Jax. Really talk to her. No more secrets. No more hiding. She looked up at him pleadingly. Will you help me? Help us face this together? Jax reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's all I've ever wanted, to help protect my family. But Sarah, you need to understand that bringing all this out in the open, it's going to be dangerous. I know, Sarah said firmly. But we can't keep running from the past. Mom shouldn't have to carry this alone anymore. We need to face it. All of us, together. Sarah's hands trembled as she set 3 coffee mugs on her mother's kitchen table. Steam rose from each cup, filling the air with a rich aroma that did little to calm her nerves. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting long shadows across the worn wooden surface, where both Linda and Jax sat in uncomfortable silence. I think it's time we all talked, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. No more secrets. No more half-truths. Linda's fingers tightened around her mug. She looked smaller somehow, hunched in her chair, her eyes darting between her daughter and Jax. The tough exterior she'd maintained for years seemed to crack under the weight of the moment. I never wanted any of this to touch you, Linda whispered, her voice thick with emotion. After your father died, I thought if I could just keep you away from that world. Jax leaned forward, his weathered face softening. Linda, she deserves to know everything. We can't protect her by keeping her in the dark anymore. I know that now, Linda replied, wiping at her eyes. I've spent so many years looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. Every time I saw a motorcycle, every time I heard about the gang in the news, I'd panic. Sarah reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Mom, please, tell me what happened. Linda took a shaky breath. Your father, he wasn't just Jax's brother. He was trying to get out of the gang, just like Jax eventually did. But there were people who didn't want that to happen. Dangerous people. Dante, Jax added grimly. The Viper. He saw your father's departure as betrayal. The night your father died, Linda continued, her voice barely above a whisper, wasn't an accident. And after that I knew I had to run. Had to hide. Had to keep you safe. Sarah felt her chest tighten. So all these years, all the moving around, the strict rules, the constant worry, was because I knew they might come looking someday. Linda finished. Dante never forgave what he saw as betrayal. He's patient, calculating. I've lived with that fear every day since. Jax's jaw clenched. I should have done more back then. Should have made sure you were both protected. But I was dealing with my own grief, my own guilt. You were there when it mattered most, Sarah said softly, thinking of that first night he'd appeared to protect her. Linda reached out and touched Jax's arm, perhaps the first gentle contact they'd had in years. I was wrong to shut you out completely. I thought distance was the answer, but maybe we're stronger together, Sarah finished. We can face this as a family. The tension in the room began to ease as years of secrets and misunderstandings finally came to light. Linda's shoulders relaxed slightly, and even Jax's usual stern expression softened. For a moment, it seemed like healing might be possible. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps against the front door cut through the peaceful moment like gunshots. Sarah felt her mother stiffen beside her, while Jax's hand instinctively moved toward his jacket. Before any of them could react, the door swung open. A tall figure stepped into the room, his presence immediately filling the space with a cold tension. Sarah recognized him from the bar incident. Dante the Viper Moreno, his sharp eyes fixed on her with calculated interest. Well, he said smoothly, his voice carrying an undertone of menace. Isn't this a touching family reunion? The man who stepped through the doorway made Sarah's blood run cold. Dante the Viper. Moreno carried himself with a casual grace that seemed more threatening than any outright show of force. His lean frame filled the doorway, and his calculating eyes swept across the room, taking in every detail before settling on Sarah. "Well, isn't this touching?" Dante's voice was smooth as silk, but carried an edge that made Sarah step closer to Jax. "A little family reunion." Linda moved forward, positioning herself between Sarah and the doorway, but Jax gently pulled her back. He knew Dante better than any of them, knew the danger that lurked beneath that polished exterior. "You're not welcome here," Jax said, his voice steady and firm. The warmth that Sarah had come to know in his eyes was gone, replaced by a steely determination. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, Jax. Is that any way to greet an old friend?" He took another step into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow seemed more menacing than if he'd slammed it. "Sarah," Dante said, turning his attention to her, "I have a business proposition for you, one that could solve all your family's problems." He spoke the last word with particular emphasis, making it clear that the problems he referred to were of his own making. "She's not interested," Jax growled, moving to stand between Sarah and Dante. "Whatever game you're playing, leave her out of it. This isn't a game, old friend." Dante's pleasant facade cracked slightly, revealing the steel beneath. "The girl's father left some unfinished business. Debts that need settling. I'm simply offering her a chance to make things right." Sarah felt her mother trembling beside her. The mention of her father's debts seemed to hit Linda particularly hard, and Sarah could see tears forming in her eyes. "The only debt here," Jack said, taking a step forward, "is the one you owe my brother. And we both know what really happened that night." Dante's expression hardened. "Careful, Jax. Some stories are better left untold." His hand moved slightly, and Sarah caught a glimpse of something metallic at his waist. The tension in the room was suffocating. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she watched these two dangerous men face off. But there was something different about Jax now, a quiet strength that made her feel protected rather than afraid. "Last warning," Jax said softly. "Walk away. Sarah's not part of our world, and she never will be." For a long moment, Dante stood perfectly still, his eyes locked with Jax's. Then, surprisingly, he smiled again, this time with genuine amusement. "You always were stubborn, Jax." He turned toward the door, but paused with his hand on the handle. "But remember this, everyone has a choice to make. Even Sarah." He opened the door and stepped out into the night, leaving behind a heavy silence. Sarah could still feel the tension vibrating through the room, could see how rigid Jax remained, as if expecting Dante to return at any moment. Linda broke first, collapsing into a chair with a sob. Sarah wanted to go to her mother, but she felt frozen in place, caught between her mother's obvious distress and the security she felt near Jax. The choice Dante had mentioned seemed to hang in the air between them, an invisible wall separating her from both the people who wanted to protect her. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Jax's workshop as Sarah paced back and forth, her fingers drumming nervously against her thighs. Maps and old photographs were spread across a weathered workbench, yellowed with age, and marked with various locations. "The old warehouse," Jax said, pointing to a spot on the map. "That's where Dante and his crew still meet. It hasn't changed in 20 years. His voice was steady, but Sarah noticed the slight tremor in his hand as he traced the route they would take. "Are you sure this is the only way?" Sarah asked, studying the determined set of his jaw. She knew the answer before he spoke. "As long as they think they have power over us, they'll never stop." Jack straightened up, his shoulders squared. "We need to show them we're not afraid anymore." Sarah nodded, remembering the fear in her mother's eyes the night before. "Mom's going to hate this plan." "Linda doesn't need to know," Jack said softly. "Sometimes protecting someone means keeping them in the dark." They spent the next hour going over the details. The warehouse had 2 main entrances and a loading dock in the back. Jax knew the layout by heart. He'd spent countless nights there in his younger days. The plan was simple. They would arrive during the weekly meeting, when most of the gang would be present. "Remember what I taught you," Jack said, demonstrating a defensive stance. "Keep your guard up. Stay aware of your surroundings." Sarah mimicked his position, feeling the strength in her muscles that weeks of training had built. The self-defense lessons had changed her, not just physically, but mentally. She felt more confident, more capable. "We're not looking for a fight," Jax reminded her. "This is about showing strength through peace. Dante needs to understand that the past is done." As they gathered their things, Sarah noticed Jax checking his phone repeatedly. His jaw clenched each time he looked at the screen. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Just checking the time," he said, but Sarah could tell he was worried. She'd learned to read his expressions over the past weeks, the slight furrow between his brows, the way his eyes narrowed when he was concerned. They loaded up Jax's truck with supplies, flashlights, a first aid kit, and other essentials. The weight of what they were about to do settled over them like a heavy blanket. Sarah thought about her mother, probably at work right now, unaware of their plans. The guilt gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. As they walked toward the truck, a shadow moved at the edge of the workshop. Before Sarah could shout a warning, 3 men emerged from behind the parked cars. She recognized one of them from the night at her apartment. Dante's enforcers. Jax immediately pushed Sarah behind him, but 2 more men appeared from the other direction. They were surrounded. "Quite the gathering you're planning," one of the men sneered, cracking his knuckles. Sarah's heart raced as she remembered Jax's teachings. Stay calm. Assess the situation. Look for openings. She shifted her weight slightly, preparing herself. The first punch came without warning. A quick jab aimed at Jax's face. He blocked it, but another attacker moved in from the side. Sarah saw the glint of metal in one man's hand. Without thinking, Sarah stepped forward, executing the move Jax had drilled into her countless times. Her elbow connected with the armed man's solar plexus, sending him stumbling backward. She spun around, using her momentum to knock the weapon from his hand. Sarah's hands trembled as she helped Jax into her car. Blood seeped through his shirt where one of the gang members had managed to slash him with a knife. His breathing was labored, but his eyes remained alert, scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. "We need to get out of here," Sarah insisted, her voice shaking. The parking lot was eerily quiet now, but she couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked in the shadows. "You need medical attention." Jax grimaced, pressing his hand against his side. "No hospitals," he managed through gritted teeth. "They'll be watching those." Sarah started the car with unsteady hands. "I know someone, a veterinarian friend who keeps quiet. She'll help." She pulled out of the parking lot, constantly checking her rearview mirror. The streets were dark and empty, but every shadow made her heart race. "You shouldn't have stepped in," Jax said softly, his voice tight with pain. "Could have gotten yourself killed." "You've been protecting me all this time," Sarah replied, making a sharp turn down a side street. "I wasn't going to stand there and watch them hurt you." The drive was tense, filled with silence broken only by Jax's measured breathing. Sarah's mind raced with everything that had happened. The ambush, the fight, the way she'd managed to use the self-defense moves Jax had taught her. It felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than her real life. They were halfway across town when Sarah's phone rang. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. With trembling fingers, she put it on speaker. "Sarah?" Linda's voice was frantic. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "Mom, I'm fine," Sarah assured her, though her voice cracked. "Jax is hurt. We're heading somewhere safe." There was a long pause before Linda spoke again, her voice different now, stronger, more determined. "Come to Uncle Mike's old cabin. Remember it? The one by the lake? I'll meet you there." Jax shifted in his seat, wincing. Linda, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Linda cut him off. I've been running from this for too long. These people, they won't stop unless we face them together. Sarah could hear the change in her mother's voice. The fear was still there, but something else too. Resolve. Strength. The sound of it brought tears to her eyes. We'll be there in 20 minutes, Sarah said, already changing direction toward the lake. Sarah, Linda's voice softened. There's so much I need to tell you. About your father, about Jax, about everything. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. But I was wrong. It's time you knew the whole truth. Mom, Sarah started, but the words caught in her throat. Just get here safely, Linda said. Both of you. The call ended, and Sarah glanced at Jax. Despite his pain, there was a hint of a smile on his face. Your mother, he said quietly, has always been stronger than she knows. Sarah drove on through the darkness, heading toward the cabin where her mother waited with answers to questions she'd carried her whole life. The night that had started with violence and fear was about to turn into something else. A chance for truth, for understanding, for facing the past together. Sarah sat on the worn leather couch in Jax's small apartment, her hands still trembling slightly. The events of the past few hours played over and over in her mind, like a bad movie she couldn't turn off. The sound of fists hitting flesh, the sharp crack of breaking glass, and worst of all, the sight of Jax stumbling backward, blood staining his shirt. She looked down at her own hands, remembering how they'd moved, almost on their own, using the defensive moves Jax had taught her. The gang member's surprised face when she'd managed to knock him down flashed through her thoughts. Even though she knew she'd had no choice, the violence of it all made her stomach churn. I should have never gotten involved, she whispered to herself, running her fingers through her tangled hair. Maybe Mom was right all along. Maybe we should just pack up and leave. The sound of Jax shuffling from the bathroom made her look up. He had cleaned up the cut above his eye, but the bruising was starting to show, painting his face in shades of purple and blue. Sarah felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. Look at you, she said, her voice cracking. This is all because of me. Because I couldn't just stay away like Mom wanted. Jax eased himself into the armchair across from her, wincing slightly. That's not true, Sarah. And you know it. This was coming whether you knew about it or not. At least, now you're prepared. Sarah stood up and paced the small living room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Prepared? I just attacked someone. I work in a cafe, for crying out loud. I serve lattes and muffins. I'm not cut out for this kind of life. You did what you had to do to protect yourself and your family, Jax said firmly. That's nothing to be ashamed of. But what if they come back? Sarah stopped pacing and looked out the window at the quiet street below. What if next time it's worse? Maybe I should just leave town, start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere they can't find me. Running away won't solve anything, Jax said, his voice gentle but firm. Trust me, I've tried that route before. The past has a way of catching up to you, no matter how far you run. Sarah turned to face him, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Then what am I supposed to do? Just wait around for the next attack? Live in fear? Jax leaned forward, despite the obvious pain it caused him. No, you live your life, but you do it smarter now, stronger, and you don't do it alone. He gestured for her to sit back down, and she did, feeling suddenly exhausted. The thing about family, he continued, is that we stick together, through the good and the bad. What happened today? That wasn't your fault. That was the consequence of choices made long before you were even born. Sarah wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I never thought my life would turn out like this. Everything used to be so simple. Simple isn't always better, Jax said softly. Sometimes the hardest paths lead us exactly where we need to be. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers with surprising gentleness. What matters most is that we face whatever comes next together. The past is what it is, but the future, that's still ours to shape. Sarah looked at their joined hands, feeling the strength in his grip, the unwavering support in his touch. They sat there in silence, the weight of their shared experiences settling around them like a heavy blanket, both understanding that their bond had been forged in fire and would not easily break. Sarah sat in the small hospital waiting room, her fingers absently tracing the pattern on the worn armrest. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking each moment as Jax recovered in his room down the hall. The events of the past few days played through her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. A nurse walked by, offering her a small smile. Sarah managed to return it, though her heart felt heavy. The bruises on her knuckles were turning yellow now, a reminder of how she'd fought to protect Jax. She never thought she'd be capable of such things, but here she was. "You should go home and rest," Jax said later that afternoon when she visited his room. He looked better today, some color returning to his face. The doctors said he'd make a full recovery, but the knife wound would take time to heal. Sarah shook her head. "I'm fine right here." She pulled her chair closer to his bed. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you actually follow the doctor's orders." Jax chuckled, then winced. "You're stubborn, just like your father was." The mention of her father didn't hurt like it used to. Instead, it brought a warm feeling, knowing she shared something with him. "Tell me more about him," she said softly. Jax's eyes grew distant with memory. "He was the best of us, you know. Always trying to do the right thing, even when it wasn't easy." He shifted in the hospital bed, getting more comfortable. "You have his strength, Sarah. I saw it the other night." Sarah looked down at her hands. "I was so scared," she admitted. "But when I saw them coming at you, something just clicked. All that training you gave me, it just happened naturally." "That's not just training," Jax said. "That's heart. You protected family, just like he would have done." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the hospital window. Sarah felt different now, stronger, but also more aware of her own vulnerability. The world seemed both more dangerous and less frightening, now that she understood how to face it. A soft knock on the door drew their attention. Linda stood in the doorway, holding a bouquet of yellow daisies. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched her purse tightly with her free hand. "Mom?" Sarah straightened in her chair. Linda stepped into the room hesitantly. "I brought these," she said, placing the flowers on the windowsill. Her hands shook slightly. I've been doing a lot of thinking." Sarah watched as her mother took a deep breath, gathering courage. The afternoon light caught the silver in her hair, making her look both older and more vulnerable than Sarah had ever seen her. "I was wrong," Linda said, her voice thick with emotion. "All these years, keeping you away from Jax, trying to pretend the past didn't exist." She looked at Jax, then back to Sarah. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was scared. And that fear kept us from having the family we could have had." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it gently. Linda continued, "Seeing you both now, how you protected each other, I understand that family isn't about hiding from the hard things. It's about facing them together." Jax cleared his throat, emotion evident in his voice. "We all did what we thought was right at the time, Linda." Linda nodded, wiping away a tear. "Maybe it's time we stopped living in fear of the past and started building something new. Together." The morning sun streamed through the cafe windows as Sarah wiped down the counter, humming softly to herself. The familiar rhythm of the coffee machines and gentle chatter of customers felt different now, more peaceful, somehow. She looked up to see her mother walking in, right on time for their new daily ritual. Linda settled into her usual spot at the counter, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Morning, sweetie. Busy day?" "Not too bad." Sarah poured her mother's favorite blend into a ceramic mug. Just the regular morning rush. She added a dash of cream, just the way Linda liked it. These morning meetings had become their way of rebuilding. At first, they'd sat in awkward silence, neither sure how to bridge the gap years of secrets had created. But day by day, the walls between them crumbled. "I found some old photos yesterday," Linda said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "I thought, well, maybe you'd like to see them." Sarah dried her hands on her apron and leaned over the counter. The photographs were worn at the edges, filled with faces she'd never seen before. In one, her mother looked young and carefree, sitting on a motorcycle with Sarah's father. Jack stood beside them, his arm thrown around his brother's shoulders, all three laughing at something long forgotten. "You look so happy," Sarah said softly, tracing the edge of the photo. Linda's eyes grew misty. "We were. Despite everything else, we were happy." She took a sip of coffee. "I spent so long trying to forget those days. I almost forgot the good parts too." Sarah's co-worker took over the counter, giving her a chance to sit with her mother. They went through the photos together, Linda sharing stories about each one. Stories about Sarah's father, about Jack's, about the life they'd all shared before everything changed. "I understand now," Sarah said, holding a picture of her parents on their wedding day. "Why you wanted to protect me. But Mom, keeping me from knowing who I am, who my family is, that wasn't protection." Linda reached across the table, squeezing Sarah's hand. "I know that now. Watching you with Jax, seeing how he looks after you, it reminded me of your father. They always did share that protective streak." The bell above the cafe door chimed, and they looked up to see Jax walking in. He moved carefully, still favoring his left side, but otherwise looked much better. The regular customers had grown used to his presence over the past few weeks, no longer startling at the sight of the gruff-looking man in a leather jacket. "Ladies," he nodded, settling into the seat next to Linda. Sarah poured him a black coffee without asking. "I've been thinking," Jack said after a moment, his voice gruff with emotion. "Now that things have settled down, maybe it's time I moved on. Give you both some space to heal properly." Sarah's heart clenched. "What? No, you can't leave." "Sarah's right," Linda said, surprising them both. "Your family, Jax. We've all lost too much time already." "I don't need a protector anymore," Sarah added, meeting his eyes. "But I do need my uncle. My family." Jack stared into his coffee cup, his shoulders tense. Sarah could see him struggling with the decision, years of guilt and responsibility weighing heavily on him. "Please stay," Sarah said softly. "We're better together, all of us." Sarah sat at her kitchen table, watching sunlight stream through the window and dance across the fresh flowers Linda had brought earlier that morning. The peaceful moment felt surreal after everything they'd been through. She heard familiar footsteps approaching and looked up to see Jax entering, his usual leather jacket replaced with a casual button-down shirt. "Hey, kiddo," he said, pulling out a chair. The nickname made her smile. It had started as something awkward, but had grown into a term of endearment that felt right. "Your mom called. She's picking up groceries for dinner tonight." Sarah nodded, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "It's strange, isn't it? How normal everything feels now." Jax's weathered face softened. "Normal's good. We've had enough excitement to last a lifetime." "So you're really staying?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the hopeful tone out of her voice. "Here in town, I mean?" "Already found a place," Jax replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "That old garage on Mason Street. The owner's retiring. Figured it's time I put my mechanical skills to honest use." Sarah's eyes lit up. The one with the red doors. That's perfect for you. Your mom helped me negotiate the deal, Jax admitted, scratching his beard sheepishly. She's got quite the business sense, your mother. The front door opened, and Linda walked in carrying paper bags filled with groceries. Her face was relaxed, a stark contrast to the constant worry that had lined it just weeks ago. I hope you're both hungry. I'm making Dad's famous pot roast. Sarah watched as Jax immediately stood to help with the bags. There was an ease between them now, the decades of tension dissolved by shared truth and forgiveness. Linda didn't flinch when Jax reached past her to put away the canned goods, a small gesture that spoke volumes about how far they'd come. I was just telling Sarah about the garage, Jax said, organizing vegetables on the counter. Linda smiled, pulling out a cutting board. It's a good investment. This town could use an honest mechanic. And what about you? Jax asked Sarah. Still thinking about those art classes at the community college? Sarah nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest at his interest. I picked up the registration forms yesterday. Classes start next month. Your father would be proud, Linda said softly, pausing her preparations. He always said you had an artist's soul. Instead of the usual pain that accompanied mentions of her father, Sarah felt a gentle acceptance. She looked at Jax, seeing echoes of her father in his features, and felt grateful for this unexpected gift, an uncle who had become the protective father figure she'd missed growing up. We should celebrate, Jax suggested, pulling plates from the cabinet with the familiarity of someone who belonged. Not just the garage or the classes, but this. All of us, together. Linda wiped her hands on a dish towel and turned to face them both. I think that's exactly what we need. A fresh start. No more secrets, Sarah added, standing to join them in the kitchen. No more running from the past. No more running, Jax agreed, his voice firm but gentle. Just family. The kitchen filled with the rich aroma of Linda's cooking as they worked together, moving around each other with growing comfort. Sarah watched her mother teach Jax their old family recipe, saw how he listened intently to every instruction, and felt the last pieces of their fractured family finally clicking into place. The sun was setting when they gathered around the table, the golden light making everything feel warm and safe. Linda served the pot roast while Jax poured drinks, and Sarah set out fresh bread still warm from the oven. Sarah sat on her favorite bench in the park, watching the morning sunlight dance through the leaves. The gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee from her cup, and for the first time in weeks, she felt truly at peace. Her thoughts drifted to Jax, and everything that had happened since that first night he appeared on her darkened street. She took a sip of her coffee, remembering how terrified she'd been when he first approached her. Now, that memory brought a small smile to her face. What had started as fear had grown into something beautiful, a bond that went beyond their family connection. He wasn't just trying to protect me that night, she whispered to herself. He was giving me back my family. Looking down at her hands, she noticed the small scrapes from her self-defense training had almost healed. Jax had taught her more than just how to defend herself. He'd shown her what real strength looked like. Not just physical strength, but the kind that came from facing your fears head on. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through recent photos. There was one of her, Jax, and her mom at dinner last week. The happiness in their faces was real, unforced. She remembered how Jax had made them all laugh with stories about her dad's childhood adventures. I never thought I'd feel this complete, she said softly, tucking the phone away. The morning joggers passed by, and Sarah watched them with new awareness. Jax had taught her to be observant, to trust her instincts. But more than that, he'd helped her find confidence in herself. She wasn't the same scared young woman who needed constant protection anymore. She stood up, stretching in the warm sunlight. Walking toward the beach, she spotted Jax's familiar figure waiting near the shoreline. He was wearing his usual leather jacket, despite the warm weather, and Sarah smiled at how some things never changed. "Uncle Jax!" she called out, quickening her pace. He turned, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Morning, kid." Sarah reached him and gave him a quick hug. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," she said, falling into step beside him as they began walking along the shore. "Yeah?" Jax's voice was gentle, encouraging. "You know, when Mom first told me about our family's past, I was so angry. I felt betrayed." Sarah kicked at a small shell in her path. "But now I understand why she did what she did, and I understand why you came back into our lives." Jax nodded, his eyes on the horizon. Sometimes protecting someone means letting them face their fears, not hiding them away. "That's exactly it," Sarah said, stopping to face him. "You didn't just protect me from physical danger. You helped me grow stronger in every way. You showed me how to face my past, instead of running from it." The waves crashed gently against the shore as they continued their walk. The morning sun warmed their faces, and a sense of peace settled over them both. Sarah felt the weight of their shared history, but now it didn't feel like a burden. Instead, it felt like the foundation of something stronger, a real family, built on trust and understanding. They walked in comfortable silence, their footprints marking their path in the wet sand. The peaceful morning stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. Sarah glanced at her uncle, grateful for his steady presence in her life. She didn't need words to express her gratitude. It was there in the quiet moments they shared, in the strength she'd found within herself, and in the peace they'd finally achieved together. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as Sarah stood before her father's headstone. Fresh flowers lay at its base, their bright colors a stark contrast against the weathered gray stone. Linda and Jax stood on either side of her, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees above them. Sarah traced her fingers over the engraved letters of her father's name. All these years, she'd visited this spot with her mother, but today felt different. Having Jax here changed everything. The weight of their shared history, the depth of their connection, and the truth of their family bonds settled around them like a warm embrace. "He would have been proud of you," Jax said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "The way you've handled everything. You're just as strong as he was." Linda reached for Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. "I kept so much from you, thinking I was protecting you." Her voice wavered. "But your father always believed in facing things head-on, just like you do." Sarah looked at the small photograph nestled among the flowers, her father in his younger days, smiling broadly with his arm around Linda. She'd seen this picture 100 times, but now she noticed Jax in the background, watching over them even then. "I used to feel so alone here," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like there was this huge part of Dad one'd never know." She turned to look at Jax, seeing the same strength in his eyes that she'd come to rely on. "But you've helped me understand him better than any story Mom could have told me." Linda wiped away a tear. "Your father always said family was about more than blood. It was about who stands beside you when times get tough." She glanced at Jax, years of unspoken gratitude passing between them. He was right. The morning light grew stronger, warming their shoulders as they stood together. Sarah thought about all the times she'd felt incomplete, searching for answers about her past. Now, standing between her mother and uncle, she understood that the answers had been protecting her all along. "All these years," Sarah said, looking at the headstone, "I thought knowing about Dad's life in the club would somehow make me feel closer to him." She paused, feeling the strength of Jax's presence beside her. But it wasn't about the past at all. It was about understanding the love that survived it. Linda stepped closer to her daughter, wrapping an arm around her waist. Your father's greatest gift wasn't the stories or the memories. It was the family he left to watch over you. Jax placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder, his touch steady and reassuring. The three of them stood there, united by loss, but strengthened by love, as the morning sun painted the cemetery in shades of gold. Sarah looked up at her uncle, then at her mother, seeing them both clearly for who they were. Not perfect people, but family who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. The truth of their past no longer felt like a burden to bear, but a testament to their love. Taking a deep breath, Sarah turned from the grave and opened her arms to embrace them both. In that moment, surrounded by the two people who had moved heaven and earth to protect her, she felt complete. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with her family by her side. Morning light streamed through Sarah's kitchen windows, casting warm patches across the wooden table, where 3 plates of French toast and fresh coffee waited. The sweet scent of maple syrup and cinnamon filled the air. Sarah stood at the counter, adding fresh berries to each plate while Linda arranged silverware with careful precision. Jax entered through the front door, carrying a paper bag filled with fresh bagels from the local bakery. His presence, once unsettling, now brought a sense of completeness to their morning routine. "Thought we might need extras," he said with a gentle smile, setting the bag down. "Some habits die hard. Always better to have more than enough." Linda's shoulders, usually tense with worry, remained relaxed as she helped unpack the bagels. "Just like your brother," she said softly, sharing a knowing look with Jax. "He always brought extra food too." Sarah watched them interact, marveling at how natural it felt now. The fear and secrets that had kept them apart for so long had dissolved, replaced by an easy familiarity that felt both new and somehow ancient, like recovering something long lost rather than creating something new. "Coffee's ready," Sarah announced, carrying the carafe to the table. She couldn't help but smile at how ordinary this moment was, and yet how extraordinary. Just months ago, she wouldn't have believed this seemed possible. Her mother chatting easily with Jax, all of them sharing breakfast, without a hint of the tension that had defined their relationships for so long. They settled around the table, passing plates and pouring coffee. Sunlight caught the steam rising from their cups, creating delicate swirls in the morning air. Through the open window, birds chirped in the maple tree outside, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from Sarah's small garden. "These are perfect," Linda said, taking a bite of French toast. Her eyes met Sarah's with pride and love. "You've always had a gift for making people feel at home." Jax nodded in agreement, his weathered features softening. "That's something special about this place," he said, gesturing around the small apartment. "It's not just a house. It's become a real home for all of us." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She thought about how this apartment had transformed from her first taste of independence into something more, a gathering place for their healing family. The walls that had once felt like they held secrets now contained only warmth and acceptance. Linda reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "I never thought we'd get here," she admitted. "For so long, I was afraid that facing the past would destroy everything. But you showed us both that the truth, even when it's difficult, can bring people together." "We all did it together," Sarah replied, looking between her mother and Jax. She saw in their faces everything they'd overcome, the fear, the secrets, the pain of separation. But more than that, she saw the future they'd built, one of understanding, forgiveness, and unconditional love. The morning light grew stronger, filling the kitchen with golden warmth. Their quiet conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences and shared smiles. In these simple moments, Sarah realized, they were writing a new chapter of their family story, one where the shadows of the past no longer held power over their present happiness. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story. and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.